1, 2, 3.
Hello and welcome to the first Winter of '93 edition of State of the Arts Television here on Rogers Community 11. I'm your host, Raina O'Neill. State of the Arts is your local arts and cultural update for Cornwall and the surrounding area. And many of you may not be aware of this, but we have a man in Cornwall who is making violins. His name is Rick Perron. We went back, he showed us his work and also gave us a brief description of the instrument's history. But first, we'll be speaking with Daniel Archambault, a local painter in Cornwall whose work is literally beginning to stand out in Europe and the United States.
Well, my name is Daniel Archambault, and I'm a middle-aged artist who lives in the country, and I've been painting for approximately 25 years. I'm a fellow who's been published with Donald Dart, Impress Graphics. I've been painting on a flat surface for the last 20 years, but I've progressed to another type of imagery. And my objective today is to show you a little bit how my style has changed from a flat surface to a relief surface. Well, the imagery that has published and that I am known for is in printed format, in posters and limited and unlimited editions. Naturally, in order to make those editions, you must work with a flat surface. But I'm departing from that. Doesn't mean that I'm never going to work on flat surface again, but I'd rather work on something a little bit different for the next few years. I haven't worked on a flat surface in almost 2 years. It's because I've been developing new technology to work on relief surface. So the reason why I've gone to a relief surface is that the European art community feels that works on paper are not valuable. That art patrons in Europe feel that paper has no traditional value. That means that they want people to paint on canvas, you know, this stuff. And this surface is a fairly durable surface. However, it's not as durable as some types of papers. We know that the Egyptians had worked on paper using wax, and it lasted a very long time. And if you go into the European museums, you'll discover that the works on canvas, especially oil on canvas, is starting to deteriorate after 200 and 300 years. In order to fulfill the gallery owners in Europe's needs and requests, what I've decided to do is work on a canvas surface, but I'm not comfortable with this fabric texture and the absorbency of the fabric. So what I've done is I've created a new surface where I've taken paper. You see this really gooey stuff. I've taken high quality paper, in this particular case a Saunders paper, and then I make a solution of this paper. And the solution is my little secret. It's taken me over a year to figure out exactly what elements have to be in here in order to have a permanent and adhering surface to work with. The process by which I apply this stuff to the surface of this canvas, this is canvas, you see? You can see it move in a little bit. but the process by which I apply it gives me the opportunity to apply it to irregular surfaces as well. That means that ultimately I can cover a car and paint it, and it would be ultimately a painting on paper or a drawing on paper. This particular painting was designed for European type of buyer. This is a mother and child, the mother that's in the wave and the child that's in the shell. And not much to say other than it was carefully construed to make a classic theme and interesting, a little more interesting from my standpoint. The shells were shells that I gathered and I made an arrangement with, and I used genuine shells to work from. And the waves were photographs that I had taken in Bermuda while visiting a friend, and I spent a lot of time studying waves there. Ultimately, that's the end product that you end up looking at. It seems that perhaps I should talk a little bit about the themes that that I am currently working with. I had begun a long time ago with a very straightforward concept, beauty, and I decided that I would try and identify beauty the best I could. I was at university at that time, and I wanted to know the definition of beauty, and I went on and researched the topic exhaustively at the Concordia and Queen's University libraries. Ultimately, I came to the realization that there were a lot of topics that did not deal too much with beauty. And what I thought would be a suitable answer would be to work with colors that were soothing and with imagery that would be easier to look at than social comments. It's pretty evident that we live in a difficult, tormented, historical society that has lots of aspects that we'd rather not see and deal with. The gore and the ugliness is not what I think a lot of people are striving to achieve. So for me, rest, beauty, and a sense of tranquility, a sense of value, a sense of family, a sense of closeness is very important in the imagery that I portray. Ultimately, that is why I choose the mothers, children, sleeping people, and the kind of personages that I feel are beautiful. Notice no self-portraits. The next topic that I'd like to discuss is the progression from which I've gone to. I spoke a little bit about working on flat surfaces and how ultimately I ended up designing a surface that I was comfortable with. And realizing that I could work with a surface that was more than flat, it was what sparked my realization that I could start working with relief images. This particular image was one where I had a young model who was very patient and was able to help me in making this relief sculpture. Now this relief will ultimately become a painting that will be either like this, like this, like this, or finally like this. If you're viewing the painting from this angle, all you see is this very impressionistic type of sculpture. From here, this person is dreaming what will ultimately be the image, the painted image. Therefore, the image will become part of her her sculpture, of this relief painting, of this relief. The other imageries that I'm working with now is another theme, and it has to do with cards. And cards have been something of some interest to me. There are tarot cards, and there are just simply playing cards. And there are so many designs on these items that are of interest to me. The geometry, the personages. You know, this is objective. You know, that you can recognize that that's an object. That's a lady. That's a person. But this stuff in here is definitely not very objective. Very designed, very interesting artwork. So I thought that playing cards had some attracted me, and ultimately I've decided to make a painting that would be a Queen of Hearts. Using this as my model, my inspiration, I have made a very large playing card. And this playing card is inverted, can be inverted the same as this little card. As you can see, I have the two Queens of Hearts. In this particular case, I managed to get the images reliefed, placed on this very large fiberglass panel. And you might wonder about the weight factor. Weight is a big problem when it comes to making artwork. If you're making a large painting that has a glass cover on it, it becomes so heavy that it might pull away from the nails in the wall. Another factor. In this particular case, this painting will ultimately weigh no more than 15 pounds. That would be 7 or 8 kilograms. The objective imagery is evident here. The rest of the image has yet to be sculpted. This is simply a foundation. It's extruded foam that's been placed as support for the rest of the relief. In order to, I will best, I'll try to explain what's the objective here. I want to have these ladies in, instead of geometric forms, I'm going to have a pile of leaves, of maple leaves, and the Queen of Hearts is always holding a flower. The Queen of Hearts in this painting will be holding flowers. We will have what looks like a yard scene of maple leaves, plus many small baby's breaths, since I'd like to keep with the mother and child theme. I will introduce not children but baby's breath as standby.
Stay with us as we unlock one of the marvels of producing one of the world's most oldest and beautiful instruments when State of the Arts returns. Welcome back to State of the Arts. One of the most enduring things to survive Europe's tumultuous past is the violin. Rick Paras has studied this instrument's history and is trying to relive the thinking that went into its creation.
Well, the name's Rick Paras. I live here in Cornwall, Ontario. For the past, I'd say 15 years, I've been working with wood in one form or another, mostly custom cabinet work around Cornwall here. I'm not trained as a carpenter or a cabinet maker. It was just more or less started as a hobby, and kind of became a greater part of my life than what I was doing as a career. I went to school as an engineer. I worked in engineering for 10 years, but never really, there was something missing. It was, the jobs were all good jobs and high-paying jobs, but I'd always come home and I was always anxious to come home to work on my in my basement, you know, on some cabinet I was building, or I just felt freedom in when I worked with wood. So as time went on, the projects became more elaborate, and I kind of changed from one venue to the next. The cabinets, things with straight lines started to become boring, if you will. I wanted more of a challenge. So I started to deal in form, more circular type cabinets and things. So at that time, Russia, I had studied a lot about Russia and followed, like most people at the time, when the Berlin Wall came down and things like that. And they kept showing this building on TV every time they would have a story on of Russia, of this beautiful cathedral, you know, and the announcer would always be standing in front of this cathedral. So the more I saw it, the more I became fascinated with it. And I had some wood, so I started with this one. It's all made out of rock maple, which is extremely hard to carve, but it had to be a very dense material to make the details of the bricks. Now, if you use a softer wood, the bricks would tend to fall off. The fibers of the wood just wouldn't hold. So I worked on that for 1,000 hours maybe. Got that far, but I found it was taking up so much of my time that there was other things were going to the wayside, and I knew I had to, if I was going to work in wood, I had to make something that would sustain me at what I truly wanted to do. Just out of chance, I did a job for a gentleman down the street here who had a collection of old violins, and he'd been tinkering with them, and he had a back plate like this one. And out of a joke, I guess, I mean, I was there to fix his bed. His bedpost was broken, so I fixed his bedpost, and when I bring it back, he said he'd never seen anything like it, how anybody could do such a job like that, and you couldn't even see where I fixed it, you know, and I replaced the whole thing. And he says, jokingly, do you think you could carve a plate out of this? And I says, well, what's it made out of? And he said, maple. And I said, sure, no problem. Because I've been just put in 1,000 hours cutting this maple, you know, with my knife here. So I knew nothing of violin building, nothing at all. Approximately 5 days later, I bring him back his plate that I had completely carved with this knife. And it was quite, just from his amazement that I could do that so quickly with no equipment and knowing nothing about violins. I guess through just how I received what he was sending me, you know, those signals, I thought, well, maybe there's something in this. It wasn't really that hard, you know? Like, where's the hard part of this? Well, I can say 18 months later, I found the hard part. There's no book written that will tell you, there's books written that will tell you how to build one, but there's not a book written that will tell you why this goes here, or how it works. There's theories of how it works, but the science that was used to create these some 400 years ago was lost. And it was a science based not on our Western type science that we know today, not of all the physics I was reading. They knew science from, the science of the day was alchemy. Like I say, Newton hadn't even been born, who was the father of calculus, from which stem most of our Western physics, you know, Einstein's and everything. I chose a maker who preceded, for example, Stradivarian. Everybody was making Stradivarians. I knew I didn't want to make a Stradivarian. What was being produced today were pretty well perfect replicas of Stradivarians, and everybody was making them. Stradivarians or Guarnaris. These two are today considered the standard violins and the best that were ever built by today's standards. You start with a plate like this particular one. Again, with my knife, I'll start and I'll just start carving it down. Because I've been carving for so long, I have a lot of strength in my hands, and that's probably why I can cut through this stuff with not much problem. I use this knife like I guess an artist would use a pen or a pencil. All my detailing work at the end, though, I've been using this knife. I use a knife from start to finish for everything. You know, it's the perfect, it's amazing. It's a square knife, flat, but it's perfect for making all the spheres it's got all the right, and I'm quite sure this is, if he did use a knife, originally it looked like this, because this just happens to fit every one of the arcs. When you look at a block like this, you really can't see the plate that's in there. I knew that inside this plate, this block of wood, there's a sliver, like this one. This was this a week ago. I had another two of them. But this comes out of the center of this somewhere, in a particular place, in a particular plane. So you can't see it by looking at, I can't look at this and see that plane in there, it's impossible. And I'm a firm believer in it's the journey that gives you the answers. If you sit here and look at it, you'll never see it. You got to get going. The more you take away, the more you see. The closer you get, the more evident it becomes. It's like walking down the street. I can look at the clock tower from here, and I know what it looks like, basically. But if I go down 2 blocks and take another look at it, well, I have a different perspective of it, and I see more detail. But I can't sit here and imagine what it looks like from York Street. I mean, I physically got to go there. The same way as this, you physically have to go somewhere in order to get closer to the end product to see it. And it's that kind of process of just getting closer and closer until you're at the final form. And once you're there, then the fun begins. Then the hard part begins. Like it's the old 80-20 law. It takes like 20% of your time to get it from this to this, and then now 80% of your time will be from this to something that looks just like this. But the difference is so fine that it either makes a violin or it doesn't make a violin. All the notes through 4 octaves can be reproduced on this plate. This plate starts on A, which is in the middle of the violin, the string, the A string. And from the A string forward, you will get each note can be reproduced on this bottom plate. Up to the A string, you have, again, the 4 octaves. It's cut in four. So what you have basically here is an E note in length that's going to break up into 4 quadrants, each being an E, but with, like for example, A440, your next A is A220. It's perfect ratios of numbers. A string will break up into a ratio, into precise ratios. These plates break up into the same ratios, except now it's not a string you're dealing with, it's a flat surface, but it still acts in the same way as the string does. Now when I put the purfling in around here, it acts as more or less a band on a drum, and will increase the flexibility of the plate. Once I start cutting that in, the resonance will start to sustain longer. I generally stop at about 6 cycles of the note. So with the bottom in an A and the top as the top plate as an E, then let me show you on here. The actual top plate is the lowest note that will be required from that string. And its lowest note will encompass the whole plate itself will vibrate. As you go up the string, then different sections come into play. A lot of the sound you hear off these violins is based mostly on resonances as opposed to vibrations as such. The vibrations will come just with the lower overtones of the notes. After you reach from the center of the note, if you will, the higher up the carrying power of the note is, its energy is derived from the resonances that occur. This wood will go into a resonance at a certain frequency, which is based on these strings. The more you play the instrument, at first, for the first year or so, the wood will settle, the glue will settle, it'll find its final balance, if you will. And as that is happening, the tone is increasing as it goes along. Nothing I'd like to do better for the rest of my life than to just make violins. I know I'm 40 now, so I may only have, if I can make 50 of them in my lifetime, that's about all I could make. But that would be quite an accomplishment for me. They're giving me a great sense of self pride in what I've done. I've done all other carvings and built other things, but nothing has sustained me as long as the violin has.
Well, that wraps it up for this edition of State of the Arts. We'll be back again next month to take a look at some people who make Cornwall a very interesting place to live. We'll see you then.